Good evening, WeatherBrains fans. Welcome to WeatherBrains episode number 829. It's the pre-show, this magical, marvelous time of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and occasionally we say outrageous things. All right, so welcome. This is for December the 6th, 2021. And I think I got everything hooked up right here. Something doesn't feel, you ever just felt like something's not quite right? We'll figure it out when it doesn't work. How about that? So let me quickly get the embed code going so we can get this on television. Dr. Louie is going to be on the show tonight, the outgoing director of the National Weather Service, Dr. Uccellini. Can't wait to have him on the show. We're going to celebrate his career and can't wait to have that conversation with everybody. All right. So Morgan Palmer is going to join us tonight. You know, Morgan makes me really feel inadequate with his big voice. I mean, he has a very, very deep voice. So let's, we'll bring him in here. But we had an interesting situation today. Goodness gracious. Yeah, we probably won't talk about this on the show tonight, but wow, that was interesting. How about that for a polygon? There's a long story behind that. That was this morning about 9:30. I'm sorry. No, it was about 10 o'clock this morning. And we'll talk about that at some other point. All right. So let's see if we can make this thing fly here. We're going to invite everybody and get this thing started. Getting awfully close to Christmas time. I can't believe it's December the 6th already. All right, so let's see who we can find here. I know that Bill Murray is out, which means it might be 50-cent beer night at Hooters. I don't know where Bill is tonight. But I think everybody else will join us. I know that Jen will be back, and we're glad she is back. All right. And we got Dr. Neal, and let's start with these folks, and we'll see if we can invite a couple more. We've got 7 minutes to showtime. Tried to get things started on time this evening. And I'll be very anxious to see if I can hear our guests in my little ear things here. Something didn't sound right just a second ago, but that's all right. We'll make this puppy fly. Had an active day here today. We had some thunderstorms. Really, they were pretty well behaved. We had maybe 5 trees knocked down in the whole state, and that was about it. And we'll be a little unsettled this week. I think it's going to be fun watching the Monday night football game. For those that are watching live, the Monday night game tonight is in Buffalo. And it has been snowing all afternoon. I mean, it looks like a snow globe in Buffalo. And of course, that's what they're used to, but I always like to watch those kind of games. In fact, a friend of mine plays for the Buffalo Bills, a guy named Mario Addison. Mario trains next door here, across the street from the TV station during the off season, and we've gotten to be pretty good buddies. And he is a great guy. And I would not want to be the quarterback when he is rushing in on you, because the man runs fast and he hits hard. But he'll be playing. I think Buffalo plays New England tonight, and that will be Mac Jones, who's quarterbacks the Patriots. Is a guy from down here. He played quarterback in college for the University of Alabama. So a lot of local ties. Oh boy, now I feel totally inadequate when I see Morgan on here, and especially when I hear Morgan on here. So Morgan, you're muted, and we will.
Yeah, give me a second here, trying to figure this out. So Let's
the
give me
melodious tones of Morgan Palmer. I do not have melodious tones. Neil, we got the biggest voice in the weather enterprise on the show tonight. It's going to make us all sound bad. But that's okay.
Everyone on this show makes me sound bad.
What do you mean? All right. So let me see if I can get, I got all kind of email. Bill Murray is out, and I've got a gazillion notes here. So let me be sure. First off, let me get Tim on here. And I'm going to copy that address, and we're going to invite him.
How's my audio and video?
Good and good.
Excellent.
A plus all the way around. All right,
Weren't you supposed to be on a boat?
Yeah, that's next week. I was, for some reason, I was thinking Louis was going to be next week. Yeah, I'm headed down to Miami later this week.
When I said Bill wanted you to run the show, I was pretty excited. Like, all right, if he's doing that from a boat, this will be good.
Hey there, James.
My boat can't even handle a walkie-talkie.
Yeah, hey, Morgan, we hear you good, loud and clear.
Great, sounds great. Okay.
All right, so let's see. You know, I don't know if I have Louis' email address. I thought I did.
Oh, I can forward him to you. Bill sent an email out with
yeah, drop his email address in the chat, Neil, and that way we can be sure he gets on here, because he is the point of the whole show tonight. And I did invite Tim. Okay, yeah, I probably could have guessed that. All right, so let me invite him real quick. And
yeah, the syntax for Noah emails lends itself to easy harassment.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. You probably had a few choice ones over the years.
Thousands.
Yeah, buddy. I bet you. I hope you saved some of them. I have a folder called Hate Mail, and I slam them all over there.
I have a folder called Career Advice.
All right. So, all right, we're 2 minutes out, and we're missing Jen and Aubrey and Troy and Louis and Tim. But that's 90 seconds is an eternity in television. So we'll see how it plays out here. Here he comes. Here comes the man of the hour. The man of the hour. Hey, Rick, can you hear us okay?
Yes, sir. I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Louis, can you hear us okay?
Oh, yeah. Hey, is that Neil?
That's me. How are you?
Pretty good. You see this wound I got on my
Yeah,
nose?
I'm afraid to ask. What's going on?
Well, tough budget negotiations.
Show title. You've already got a show title, and the show hadn't even started yet. Wow.
No, I'm only kidding. I had a stupid accident on Saturday. So just don't sit on a rocking chair and look down to see what's on the bottom part of the bookshelf, because rocking chairs don't steady you. They throw you out. So incredible.
Don't tell the story yet, Lou. We got to wait till the show starts. Let's see. Troy, Kimmel, can you hear us okay? Jen, everybody here?
Yep, hear you fine. Hey, Louis.
Okay, good.
Hey, Troy, how you doing?
Doing good, sir. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Kim. How you doing?
Morgan.
Hey, here comes.
Great. Good
Aubrey.
to see you.
All right. Well, but let's start the show, because I sense some good things will happen. I don't want to miss any of it here. So let me get the recorders going here. You don't want to miss the good stuff. So, and I don't know if the AMS weather band spot runs tonight or not. Do we know that?
I don't think so. I think he wanted to wait till next week.
Yeah, he wants to
Okay.
push it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains episode number 829. This is the weekly show that's all about weather. This is for December the 6th, 2021. This is James. Thank you so much for joining us. And we've got a very special show coming up tonight. I can't wait to get into it. By the way, Bill Murray, who is typically our guest booking officer, he's out tonight. It's 50-cent beer night at Hooters. So we know that when that happens, Bill is never here. But we do have Dr. Neil Jacobs. Neil, so next week you're going to be on a boat somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, right?
Well, probably more like the Everglades and the swamp, but it's close enough.
Oh, okay. That's close enough. But you are in position tonight. How are you, sir? How's your hand?
It's doing great. I got the all clear from the doctors to go ahead and do all the stuff I had been doing for the previous 3 weeks. So I'm home free.
Okay. We've got several that are playing injured on the show here tonight, including our special guest, Troy Kimmel. What's happening in Austin, Texas? How are you? I'm
doing good. I think I moved one book back there last week. So, just one step at a time, things are getting back to some degree of normalcy here at the house and office.
So maybe by the time you hit your 1-year anniversary, life will be back to normal.
Maybe. That's not a promise at this point.
Jen, it is so good to have you back after a little hiatus. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. Feeling great. And I'm cold. I think it is like the frozen tundra up here. We're supposed to get down into the teens tonight. So, but I'm good and hanging in there. It's good to see everybody's face.
Welcome back. It's great to have you back. I've been watching the video coming out of Buffalo today. Buffalo will be hosting the New England Patriots. And it is cold and it is windy and it is snowy and it's a great night for football in Buffalo, New York. It looks great up there.
Oh, man.
Let's see, Aubrey, let's see, are you in the cold air yet in Harrisonburg?
Yes, the cold air came in about 90 minutes ago. It was beautiful today. We had a high of 66. It was great. It was warm. It got windy and then the cold front came in and now it's 46 and we're going to be in the 20s tonight. So yeah, it's cold.
All right. Kim, is it cold in Norman, Oklahoma?
Oh, it sure is. The temperature dropped something between 25 and 30 degrees, what felt like almost instantaneously. And we had a beautiful, beautiful day in the 70s yesterday. It was a great day to get the kids outside and run all their energy out so that we could survive today inside. But yeah, we're feeling winter for a brief time before the end of the week when we'll return to near record high temperatures.
Awesome. So we started off this day at 68 and we're at 47. So we have gone the wrong way today here. So I think everybody's feeling the colder air. Let's see. Tim, can you hear us okay? Are you on the line with us?
I can hear you. I'm here.
Good. How are you? Welcome to the show. Where are you located, Tim?
Oh, I'm in Silver Spring, Maryland.
Okay.
I'm here because the boss is here.
I know you're the handler. We know exactly your role. For those that don't know, Tim is just checking to be sure that we don't do anything or say anything ugly. And so we're going to be on our best behavior for this show, which might be an all-time first. But I tell you what, Neil, first off, let's see, Rick. We got Rick Smith, who of course is the greatest WCM on the planet, who is in Norman, who is. Why did you say I mean, come on. I mean,
I'm one of the good WCMs in Norman. I can say that much. So.
Yeah, he is one of the best. He's one of the best.
Yeah.
No, we all know he's a man of humility, and he won't say that, but he is a role model for every WCM in the country. So, Rick, how are you? You look good. You feel okay?
I'm 99% better. Yeah, the cough is about gone, so feeling good. And I don't know if anybody's heard, but we've got a new football coach here in Norman now. It's kind of a big deal, kind of a crazy. People camped out at the airport last night when the front came through, and I don't think they were dressed for it. Anyway,
they
lots of excitement in Norman the past week. Do what?
Sorry, it was hilarious, Rick. They were not dressed for it. No, I don't think anyone was following weather news amid the drama surrounding football.
The plane couldn't even land because the wind shift was right on top of them, so they had to go around. And anyway, that's been the excitement in Norman. Weather-wise, it's been kind of up and down with temperatures, but yeah, the coaching thing is crazy.
Yeah.
So we'll convert this to Sooner Brains real quick. Tell us about the new coach, Rick. What do you think?
I'm pretty happy. I mean, Brent Venables has been here before. He was here 99 to 2011, something like that, and he came back. I don't know. He signed a huge contract yesterday. I'd probably be smiling and happy too, but he seemed genuinely happy to be here and excited. And I think a lot of the players, the ones that haven't left us, are excited. And I think it's going to be good things. It may take a little while, but I'm pumped for it. I think it was a good hire.
All right. Well, good deal. So that's Sooner Brains, our segment this week. So Dr. Neil, if you would, Neil Jacobs, maybe introduce our special guest. It's going to be a great show tonight as we celebrate the career of a great individual in the weather enterprise.
I'm absolutely thrilled and humbled for the opportunity to introduce Dr. Louis Uccellini, who has spent over 50 years in meteorology and 43 years as a public servant. Congratulations, sir, for such an amazing and stellar career, and thank you for your service. I've from a personal perspective, I've looked up to you my entire career. I cited multiple papers of yours in my PhD dissertation, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later. But I got to say, one of the highlights of my careers was the Friday tag-up meetings, when we would all sit around the table and it's usually some fish issue that's got everyone worked up, and we would just sit there and discuss latent heat release and potential vorticity while everyone else
vertical distribution of latent heat release.
Yeah, those were some amazing times. So I really want to dig into a lot of your background and your career and sort of what led you here. But I gotta say, and I don't know if your staff has told you this or PCO or whoever, but some of the greatest times that we had that you may not have been told about were what we referred to as the Louis history lessons. And it would always be something that would come up in the weather forecast world, and you would always tell us, well, I remember, like, there was this one time, and then there would be this story behind it, and it was awesome. And all I got to say is I really hope that a lot of those are being recorded, because there's such a wealth of knowledge and history of just the personalities and the stories about how a lot of this came to be it's in your mind. These are the stories that we want to hear. So before we dig into some of those, I'm just sort of curious, what got you into meteorology? So you went to Wisconsin. Why did you pick that as a degree focus?
I was always interested in weather, as far as back as I can remember. My parents used to joke that I was pointing to clouds before I could talk, and got excited about snow. You know, as soon as I looked out a window, I was able to look out a window. I don't know why. But as far back as I can remember, I was excited about weather. You know, Carol, we had tropical storms that went right over Long Island in the 50s. Donna went right over our house in 1960 in September. We had incredible snowstorms that I remembered especially in the winter of 60-61. It was sort of like that was the banner year to lock me in, because in December of 60, we had a really great snowstorm. And then we had the inauguration storm in January 61 that passed over Long Island. And then in February 61 afterwards, it actually snowed with snow. And I can almost give you like an hour by hour review of what happened. I mean, it just literally locked me in, but I was always interested.
So what was it about extratropical cyclogenesis and the winter nor'easters? I know that there was sort of a big focus on studying both upper level influence as well as sea surface temperatures, but it was unique to something with the Gulf Stream and the East Coast. Why was that something of interest to you?
Well, experienced it. And there were TV meteorologists that I think when you hear any story, there's always a TV meteorologist. And the one who grabbed my attention was Tex Anton. Tom Skilling and I have talked. There was also Gloria Ocon. I think she was the only woman TV meteorologist at the time, was in New York City. But it was Tex Anton. He would actually get into it. And he was the first one, by the way, that started talking about this new tool that this numerical models. There's nothing on the East Coast now. And he always had a question mark on the Carolina coast. And he says, but the models are indicating this is like in the 60s. So he should, whatever he was getting. And that was my first awareness that they were using computer-based models as part of forecasting. And I have to tell you that living on Long Island, of course, you got that rain snow line that's closer than I imagined when I was, when it was snowing in your backyard, you thought it was snowing everywhere. But what really struck me was how just a little shift would knock us into rain, and yet New York City would still be snowing, or right, like Yonkers or whatever. And I always wondered why, how does that happen? And then it's pretty clear after my father put up the anemometer, if the wind turned southeast, we were done, right? If it kept northeast, we still had a chance of keeping the snow. So that's the ocean. Southeast of us is the ocean, right? So all these things start playing in year after year after year. Close friends and I, that's all we lived for, was the winter, the fall and winter, hurricane season and the winter storms.
So you study this, you're excited about it. How did you go from PhD in meteorology at Wisconsin over to NASA? Like, what was that jump? Were they focused on building out that program?
Well, the thing is you had noted, how did I select Wisconsin? First, because it's an important part of answering this next question. So I read what I could find on meteorology, but it was all descriptive, so you have to keep that in mind. But my aunt, my mother's sister, recognized, my interest, and had a friend who worked in the weather office that was in Garden City at the time. So that's a couple of towns over. So she took me over to that forecast office. And this is a true story. I walk in, and her friend, I think his name, I actually can't remember his name, but he meets me at the door. And he brings me over to this guy who's working on, I think, a surface analysis or something. And I got introduced as this young high school student who's interested in meteorology. And the first thing this guy says to me, he says, "There's no future in meteorology. Go find something else to do." Obviously, a disgruntled weather bureau, still the weather bureau employee. So he takes me, just turns me around, brings me over to the next guy who was looking at the strips of satellite images. They had them on all these strips. They didn't have, and he listened to my story, my interest, and he says, "Well, you really want to get into this field, you got to go to the University of Wisconsin, because you see what I'm looking at here?" He says, "That's the future of meteorology." He didn't mention anything about models, by the way. And he said, there's a professor out of Wisconsin, Vern Sumi, who is defining, the satellite meteorology. That's where you want to be. And I took a circuitous route there. Probably, I applied too late coming out of high school. So I actually went to Syracuse my freshman year. Took meteorology there in the geography courses. And the professor of geography, Hammond, had just come back from Wisconsin on his sabbatical. And that's the first thing he said to me when he saw that I was doing my test with him in color, with color pencils. And he said, "You got to go to Wisconsin. They got a new building." You mentioned Sumi, you mentioned everybody else. I filled out my application that night, sent it to Wisconsin. I requested the application that night and had an application in within 2 weeks. And then it just took off. So Sumi got me interested in the satellites. She was never my major professor. But when Goddard started up, Don Johnson is the one. I wound up getting my master's under Charlie Anderson, the first, really first Black man in the world to get a PhD in meteorology. I got my master's under him. I left him and went up to Don because I wanted to do larger scale. It was severe weather and cyclone related, but I wanted to do work on the jet streaks. I was influenced by Elmer Ryder's book. I was probably the only one to read it cover to cover twice, you know, that 400-page book. As I was finishing my PhD, we got, Don is the one who showed me the notification on the lab. I gave a talk at a conference and Bill Shank walked up to me from the lab that was being developed under Dave and said, how would you like to work at NASA? And I thought about it and Don encouraged me. And Sumi did not encourage me to go to NASA. That was the competition. But that's where I went. And it was, I didn't realize it at the time. Joanne Simpson came in a year after I did and became a boss. And that really made it for me. She really put an accelerator on my career. But I realized once I got there, being in a new lab is a hell of a lot better than being in a lab that's been around for a while. So, you know, you get to make your own things. And within a year after Joanne arrived, and she gave me the charge to lead the mesoscale analysis and modeling section and gave me 6 FTEs to fill. Got Dan Kaiser, Ralph Peterson, Paul Cosin, Steve Koch, Svigal Chen. Eventually got Franco Einaudi to come over. I mean, it's just what a brain trust. I mean, it was just an amazing group and a lot of people working in the contract corps that then worked their way up, like Keith Brill and Tony Mostek and Bob Awney and the like. They all worked for that section at one time or another. And then, of course, Mary Desjardins, who built the NAWIP system eventually that, you know, brought all the national centers together. She built GEMPAC while she was in at Goddard Space Flight Center under, we like to say she worked under us, you know, that's baloney. She, you know, she if she were alive today, she just passed away, unfortunately. She would tell you that she chose us. We didn't choose her. So, you know, this was just a major breakthrough for us because we could work the data for research purposes, and then we developed it as a real-time system and brought it over to the Weather Service.
So I want to dig into the NASA thing, but real quick, for those listening on audio only, Louis joining us with a bandage on his nose. And I just saw what looks to be some type of splint on his right hand. And now I'm actually starting to believe your fight over the budget negotiations.
Yeah, getting old is rough, you know. But now, so I don't think we need to go into it, but let's put it this way. I have no idea what happened on this nerve thing in my thumb, but this is really helping that. The nose we'll forget about, but just don't go bending over looking at the bottom level of your bookshelf on a rocking chair, thinking that it's going to hold you, because it doesn't. So anyway, what else you got?
I've got so much, you have no idea. So a couple of the papers that I've cited were the ones that you wrote with COSM, but tell me a little bit about the chapter 6, the processes contributing to the rapid development of extratropical cyclogenesis. That single chapter had such an influence on my PhD research because no one really had consolidated a lot of the potential vorticity and the low level processes, latent heat release. How did that chapter come about?
So that was in the Palmain volume. And what happened was, you know, out at Wisconsin, I did more work on the severe convection and got really interested in the jet streaks. And and then it was really, everything in its severe weather forecasting was in a cookbook mode. You needed a low-level jet. It was at an angle to the upper-level jet, so you'd have your veering of wind with height for your warm air advection, the low-level jet with all the moisture transport feeding into this. And as I started studying the jet streaks and realizing that, this indirect circulation in the exit region and the direct circulation in the entrance fills the whole troposphere. It doesn't stay at the jet level. I realized that the bottom branch of that indirect circulation is exactly where the low-level jets were forming, and they weren't done. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a coincidence. And that all of these ingredients, the ingredients in the synoptic cookbooks, were tied to this dynamically forced transverse circulation pattern. And so that's what I do my PhD on. So lo and behold, then I come over to the East Coast and I rediscover my roots on East Coast cyclogenesis. And I wake up on the morning of February 19th, 1979 to 4 to 5 inches per hour of unforecasted snow related to the President's Day storm. And then there are, so I haven't collected, I'm just new at Goddard. They don't really have the infrastructure to pull everything together, but that storm really captured me. How did that dig a hole in the ground in its development phase? Totally unforecast. Okay. And I said, I got to study that storm. Meanwhile, Lance Bozart is studying this storm. And he's focusing on, and that first phase developed under a ridge. So the trough is still way the hell out there. So they were looking at low-level forcing, and I say, no, there's got to be a jet. So there was a subtropical jet. So we got sort of in this scientific debate, and we just did a podcast on that that Dave Schultz organized on the back and forth, and we both agreed. By the time I got to that chapter, I wrote 4 going on 5 papers on the President's Day storm. And I came to the conclusion after the modeling work that we did synoptic analysis with data, and then we did the analysis with model diagnostics, that we were both right, that you needed the upper levels, but you also needed that boundary layer. I couldn't get the rapid cyclogenesis without the boundary layer. And just having latent heat without the boundary layer, you couldn't get it. And you couldn't get it without the latent heat and only the boundary layer. You needed it all. That's where the synergy comes in, the synergistic interactions. And so that was the papers we were writing. In the middle of this papers, I sent things out to Chester Newton to look at, because I was having some rough times in the review process, and he would always give me advice. Anyway, he writes me one day and invited me. He was a co-chair on that conference, the Palmain conference, and invited me to do the invited talk on rapid cyclogenesis. And I've never been invited to do anything like that, much less at an international conference. And I have to tell you, I must have read 50 articles. I mean, I worked a whole year. I still had a lot of other stuff to go on, but I just started stacking up references, went through them all, realized that people had, this back and forth between, I read Kutzbach's book on the thermal theory of cyclones back in the 1800s when they started studying these things. It was all diabatic processes. It was all the warmth. And then the dynamics comes in, and then they try to predict this stuff with models in the 1950s and 60s without the diabatic process. They can't get it. So we went from thermodynamics all the way to purely dynamics, and then the realization that you needed both. So I showed this circle of research, and then that led me to set up what was going on at the time and how, at least our studies and others actually going on at the same time brought us to this point where you needed these processes working together. This idea of one being more important than the other, et cetera, you got to have them. You got to have them all. And this is why I got hung into the vertical distribution of latent heating and how sensitive the models are, especially as you increase the vertical resolution models, that just a slight shift upward or downward of the latent heat profile can give you rapid cyclogenesis. So remember the latent heat bombs that people talked about? So anyway, that's how I got in there. And I was actually ready to tell Chess. I said, I don't think I can do this. But Joanne is the one who said, you can do this. What do you think? What are you, crazy? So she encouraged me to do it. She said, just don't wait. You don't wait until the last minute. So I said, well, I'd already had a stack like this. And she says, no, you got to. So I worked on that all year leading up to that conference. And I enjoyed it afterwards. By the way, that's where I hooked up with Bill Hibbert. And I ended my talk at that conference with that 10-minute video that we did, which eventually grew into Viz 5D, where I showed the Eulerian viewpoint and the Lagrangian. I showed the white tornado with the two surface of the PV that developed upstream from mesoscale processes. And then that was new. And then influenced cyclogenesis. All that was on the film. Got a standing ovation for the film. They asked me to run it again. So my talk, you never go over on an international conference. So isn't this 10-minute shot that the organizer of the conference was sweating over? And then we had another 10-minute discussion on that. And that was the beginning of Viz 5D for Bill. Bill's career took off from that. I always, I made sure he got the credit for it and was the lead author on the bulletin paper that we wrote on that. So, a lot of great things going on, but that was one of my favorite papers that I wrote.
I'm a huge fan of Viz 5D actually. So what led to the shift over to INSET?
So the thing is, I was always interested in the forecast challenges even as a kid. How can they always be wrong? Or how can they forecast snow and we get rain, or the rain and we get, what's with the forecast here, right? So I was always interested. And of course, as a kid, you're always complaining about, always excited when the forecast is, was blown, and then you get these big storms, when you're not expecting it. Of course, that's always, but it was always there. When I started my work at Wisconsin, every paper I wrote, gravity waves, jet streaks, everything started with the operational data from in the fax room. All those papers started in the fax room on the 14th floor, the department. So when I went to NASA, same thing. I got all my data from NCDC to start working on that, and then got things processed at Wisconsin. And Paul Cosin shows up, and he's a better analyst than I am. My God, he's just a natural. And I wound up growing. He grew up about 5-6 miles from my house. So didn't know each other, of course. So the thing is, I had this operational thing, and I started getting interested in R2O. And I started writing papers from the Storm. There was a Sesame, and then Storm, and then the U.S. Weather Research Programs. Those were the sequence. Storm had O&R in it. That was operations and research. So I was really interested. I started writing white papers on it for folks who were developing field programs. We needed the operational research community. And Jim Hogue, who was in the development division at the time, working with Norm Phillips, we became pretty good friends. And he said, Louis, if you're going to write about R2O, maybe you ought to learn a little bit about O. And so I started hanging around NMC, heard about the modernization, got to know Ron McPherson and Bill Bonner, and they took a chance on me when the meteorological largest forecast office in the Weather Service. Ron was moving to headquarters. That position was opening up, and they chose me. I didn't have 1 day experience in an operational forecast office, but I was interested in every aspect of it, including the infrastructure and everything else. And it worked. I kept on asking Bill, what were you? I saw Bill later in life. I said, what were you thinking? Hiring me to do that job. Anyway, it worked out, but I got to tell you, after I got there, within a month, the papers I was working on, R2O, I put in a box somewhere, and I never saw them again. Okay, because I had no clue, really, what it would take for R2O to work until I spent the 4.5 years on the floor at MOD, and then went to headquarters, and then I got the NSEP job. But the point is, I was interested in doing it, that the job didn't end with the research. It really ended with operational implementation.
You're exactly right. And I think one of the things that's often overlooked is the O to R aspect of that. And I don't see how they're inseparable. So that, how much do you think that knowledge of the inner workings of the R to O process that you gained at INSEP helped you when you went over to the Weather Service HQ? What was that transition like?
Yeah, that was an interesting transition, I have to tell you. We were in the middle of the modernization, and I got to tell you, the main reason I went over there, I mean, I wanted to understand the operations, but I listened to a talk given by Ron McPherson at one of the Cyclone workshops about the modernization before they actually started implementing it. It was because I went over in 1989, so I think I heard the talk maybe 1988, and that cemented. I wanted to be part of the modernization. So when I went at the headquarters in 1994, the modernization was going on. I took over Office of Meteorology, the SUP program, and the WCM program was their part of the modernization. So I certainly influenced those two programs. But I can tell you that the experience within MOD prepared me for OM. I couldn't have jumped into OM as an outsider and been functional. So you got to, I still didn't have the street creds with the operational community, even with the 4.5 years at MOD, because it was the center. It wasn't the field. It wasn't a WFO, right? So learned that, you got to. So when I went back to NCEP, I made sure that the centers worked more collaboratively, but also reached out to the field and worked better with the field. And that was a lot of cultural barriers to that we had to overcome. And it wasn't until the Weather Ready Nation stuff hit that we were able to start dealing with some of those cultural barriers and make it work for everybody. So that's the way it kind of worked. But once I got my feet on the ground in the Weather Service, I didn't know I'd be the director. In fact, after NCEP, 13 years at NCEP and getting that new building completed, I thought that was it. That would be the marker. I didn't think I'd get or even be in a position to get the NWS job.
So I remember the old NCEP building, and that new building is unbelievably nice. It is, I mean, excellent work on getting that across the finish line, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, getting something like that done is next to impossible.
The stars lined up on that one, I can tell you. Right people at the right time made that happen each stage of the way. But the programmatic vision was ours, and brought that forward. We wanted a place that would attract the best and the brightest, and it certainly did before the COVID. I've been in and out of that building a couple of times since COVID, and it's really depressing in a sense that there's just so few people there. But it'll come back. I mean, it attracts, but we were attracting the international community too, which is something you couldn't attract international people to Camp Springs, in that, that insurance building or whatever it was before we moved in. Single pane windows. That building had single pane windows. So during the winter, if you were on the south side of the building, it was warm. If you were on the cold side of the building, on the north side of the building, it was cold. And that was the big joke about why they called it the World Weather Building, because you could imagine that, you're in this building with its own circulation, but single paned window. It was and cement floors, you had to drill holes in the floor to get wires through so you didn't have, and the building got knocked down. The building is knocked down, by the way. It's gone.
Is it really?
They couldn't get anybody else to move into that.
Wow. I was in that building. I was in that building the day the DC earthquake hit. And yes. I remember we all ran out into the parking lot, and everyone was like, we should actually get a professional inspector to check the building out before we go back in.
So yeah, I was in my office. I didn't know you were there. Were you meeting with Bill?
I was doing seminar there with Bill and Steve Lord.
Right. Yeah. So Steve Lord was the director of EMC, and Bill was his deputy at the time. And I knew Bill. I encouraged Bill to come over. I mentored him for like 6 months in one of the programs. Encouraged him to come over, and the fact that I came over from NASA, and he did, and he was immediately impacted the whole EMC thing. But I was down in the office, and the windows started like blowing out like there was wind. It's like, what the hell's that wind? What the hell's going on with the wind? It wasn't supposed to be windy today. And I look out, and the trees like straight up, right, and then it started pulsing in and out again. And the secretary says, earthquake, and she dives under the desk. And I said, no, we got to get the hell out of here, because I know this building can't be really strong. And it turns out, if you read the protocols for earthquakes, she's the only one in the entire building that I know of who did the right thing. You're not supposed to run out of these buildings because the side walls can come down on you and all this other stuff. And I found all this out like 3 days later, right? You guys and gals, everybody who's standing in that parking lot, you all did the wrong thing that ran out before you got the all clear to actually walk out of the building, right? So I said, yeah, I just was imagining that building pancaking. That's all I thought about. So I was getting.
That's all we thought about. I didn't know if I should like hide under a table or stand in the door frame. So we all decided to just run down the stairs.
Yeah, you were on the second floor. I was on the ground floor. I don't know what the 8th floor people did, but yeah, that was. Anyway.
So you end up at the Weather Service. You've got this fantastic new facility with NCWCP. What were your goals when you came there? Like what sort of led to the idea behind IDSS? Did you have priorities lined up in advance when you got to the Weather Service?
So in 2009. Jane Lubchenco was one of the first political selectees of the Obama administration. So she came into NOAA early in 2009. And the word went out immediately that each line office within NOAA would have to do a strategic plan that would then feed into a NOAA strategic plan. And we needed to come in there with the goal and the main goal and whatever fed into the goal as and then we had to iterate with the NOAA team in that process. I wasn't associated with that strategic plan, but I'm not going to go into who was. But the point is, it wasn't going very well. So Jack Hayes, who was the director of the Weather Service, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "We want you to lead the strategic team." By the way, that wasn't the first time. I got Ron McPherson tapped me on the shoulder when I was an MOD to be the lead on the team that created NMC. Okay, so I led that team. Ron had an outline of what he wanted. Okay, but we had to make it work. So I was the lead of a team there. So Jack must have heard about that. Anyway, he tapped me on the shoulder, and then I became the lead of the team, and we pulled together a small team. And that's where Weather Ready Nation came from, and that's where DSS came from. And I can tell you that the building a Weather Ready Nation became our outcome. A built Weather Ready Nation was actually the person who came up with that idea was Maureen Laverne, the only non-meteorologist on the team, who warned us not to come up with another strategic plan that said, we're going to improve the front forecast by that much on a map, or whatever. We'd come up with a meteorological. We needed a societal outcome. And when she put that on the table, the rest of us, it was about 8 or 9 of us, including field people, the union vice president, the people from NCEP that have worked closely with me, John Sokich from the political team. We just sat back and said, whoa, right? And then we came up with how to make that work with decision support services to go beyond the forecast and warning to connect with decision making. All that was done in 2009 and 10. But it never got, and we wrote it up, but it never really got used Then 2011 happened, and they had the national conversation in Oklahoma, and Catherine Sullivan asked me to lead that, which I did with Mike Morgan from NSF, and then I sat there and said, "Man, we got to do this. We got to do this." But then the financial stuff happened, and it just sat on the shelf until I came on board. So when I came on board, my first presentation to the field was two things. We're a science-based service organization, and we have a strategic plan, and the goal is we're going to build a weather-ready nation. And I just took that plan right off the shelf, put it on the table, said, let's go. That's how it happened.
It's been a brilliant plan, and that's a great background on that. And Louis, let me stop very quickly and bring in Morgan Palmer. Morgan, I am so sorry. Forgot to introduce you properly at the beginning of the show. And typically, Bill Murray is here, and he handles all of this. So I am the substitute guest booking officer tonight. For those that don't know, Morgan is the chief meteorologist for KIRO in Seattle. You've been there 10 years. 10.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's hard to believe it's been that long up here in the Northwest. Yeah. And we've had some interesting weather recently and some flirtations with snow, and we're going to keep having that here pretty soon. We have had a few issues, but up here in the Northwest, it's awfully cold this time of year, at least in the mountains, not so much in the lower elevations, but we've had a few issues where at least the snow levels have begun to creep down below about 1,000 feet. And I'd like to ask Dr. Uccellini, as far as snow forecasting goes, and over the next few years, say 5 to 10 years, up here in the Pacific Northwest, especially in Western Washington, our snow levels are of critical importance, whether we're at 200 feet or 800 feet or 1,000 feet. And the global models still have a difficult time resolving some of that. How do you see the forecast skill as far as some of the very granular detail with snow versus elevation and terrain improving with subsequent models, including the GFS?
Very slowly. The snow forecast, I contend is the hardest forecast. Now, people in hurricanes will tell you something in the hurricane forecast is the hardest. Severe weather is the hardest. Flooding is the hardest. Everybody has their, but I can tell you the snow forecast is and the lack thereof is the one that makes me the most nervous as a weather service director, because governors don't take any prisoners, right? So the thing is, you got to have that phase just right. You got to have the right moisture at the right place at the right time with a temperature structure that'll get the snow to the ground. And that could be a function of all the internal dynamics and thermodynamics in the atmosphere, or the elevation, or both. And that whole combination, really points to what we have to gun for in the next generation modeling systems, which is the highest resolution. The researchers have been saying 1 kilometer cloud resolvable resolution is needed to solve, really to nail these processes down. That's out there. I think it's possible with the projections of what computing will look like, and the modeling. We were talking about the R2O process. Neil's paper on EPIC is it out yet, Neil? Officially out? I believe it is. I know we are writing a second paper, and that's being submitted to the bulletin to show, the more of the tactical aspects of EPIC and where we are and where we hope to go with it. I look at it as a historic opportunity to bring the larger research community to bear on these types of issues, to do exactly what you're talking about, Morgan, because, you got to have local interest in these problems too to solve them. They're not going to be solved in one center or another. I mean, the awareness of what's actually happening is ingrained in the people that you talk to every night, right? So this is something that I hope will really accelerate the R2O process and be able to work on problems like that. But these are difficult problems and difficult issues. And I can say, without any hesitancy. It's not just being able to do it once or twice. It's why can we do this? Make a prediction of a system 10 days in advance, like the January 2016 storm, and nail it. Boom, 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 all the way in. And then in March 2018, the 24-hour forecast from all the centers are so screwed up that you still don't know what the hell's going to happen. Okay. So it's going to be a slow haul, but those are the kinds of things that I think the future modeling systems, working with the larger research community, will be able to address with a little bit more speed than the advancements we've made in the past.
Right.
Yeah, Louis, to answer your question, BAM's paper on community modeling came out this month.
Okay. Great. So I can tell you that that Rick Spinrad and Craig McLean voted me the lead author on the follow-up paper.
Awesome.
I had actually was working it, and Rick, flipped them around. But Rick's part of the paper. So,
very cool.
Yep.
It's exciting for me to see this continue on.
Yep.
So, Dr.
So Morgan, did I answer your question? It was a long
Absolutely.
answer. I'm sorry, Kim. But.
Absolutely. We know it's a slow process, and the University of Washington up here has taken some of the physics and they're running their own models at 4/3 kilometer. And there have been some very good results with that, but being able to replicate it, as you mentioned, over and over again, instead of last February when we had a snow event in Seattle, the forecast models, especially the European, was way overboard with snow, or so we thought. And then it came in fairly accurate. And then over the past week or so, the GFS was pointing toward, 8 to 10 inches of snow in Seattle, when we knew that the thermodynamic profiles were just not likely to support that much snow. Finally, it backed off, but it caused a lot of interest, shall we say, on social media for a few days when it was predicting such extreme snowfall amounts, which are unusual for the Seattle area in the month of December, and we had to tamp down expectations. So it's like whack-a-mole. Sometimes you get it right, but a lot of the rest of the time the models are trying and they're not quite there.
Yep. And everybody, when we get together with Florence Raviev from the European Center, all these models are made available to our forecasters, and we can all pick out events that we do well on and we don't do so well on. So we make sure that we get those multi-model ensembles to try to nail this down. Anyway, I'm sorry, Kim. No, go ahead.
Yeah, you're fine. And Morgan, I feel for you. That sounds like an exercise in frustration that you constantly are facing, being in that geography and that market, sandwiched between the social meteorologists and the models that aren't necessarily helping you as much as you would like to be helped. So certainly appreciate you wanting to ask that question and get that clarification from Dr. Uccellini. So Dr. Uccellini, I want to just transition topics a little bit here and talk a little bit about another aspect that you got to bake into your career. Part of being the director of all these organizations is just it has the scientific component that you have, of course, focused on some, but there's also the interfacing with policy component, which may or may not be how you got the injury on your nose and hand. But there's the interfacing with the political world. And I had a really brief experience working in a Senate office, but in that experience, I got to see you when you came to the Hill, and I'll never forget, going to see your briefing and just remembering how well respected you were in, so many different corners of the Hill, and that was a rare thing. There weren't very many, political officials who enjoyed that kind of support, and I loved watching your briefing both scientifically and politically. You were just really, really good and comfortable at relating to the things that people were interested in. It had been right after Sandy had happened, and you were talking about the performance of the GFS, in particular. And it just was really, really well, it was heartfelt and well crafted. So I want to ask you a little bit about this part of your job. I don't think anything can prepare you to have that in your life. And I'm curious how it was that you took it in, adapted to it. Did you enjoy that facet? What is it like to be the director of the National Weather Service in its totality and not just about the science piece?
I still wrap my head around that last question because every day I kind of pinch myself because I never thought, this would happen actually. I can say that the most important feeling I have every day is to be, I almost feel blessed to be the leader of the best workforce in the federal government. And I'm talking about the most committed and dedicated workforce with respect to a mission. They crawl over broken glass to serve and prior to and during these extreme events to their mission standards. It's just amazing. So when I got this job and realized in a real sense, and I sensed this even while I was at NCEP, that the headquarters wasn't structured to really serve the field. The very first thing when I got in was to adjust, to actually restructure the entire budget to map the forecast process, right? And then headquarters structure, a one-to-one relationship with those offices. When I was director of Office of Meteorology, I had budgets to administer, but no authority over the field. On paper, I did, but they could go and get money from all over the Weather Service and not listen to me. So I had to get all of that structured and then get focused on the needs across each one of those portfolios. So I started interacting with the Hill on that, and it resonated with them. But I have to say that my first association with the Hill was with the building, and back under Jack Kelly. Yeah. And Jack was very emphatic about you have to sustain your credibility with the Hill. That was the first lesson. You have to establish it and then sustain it. And if you don't know, you tell them you don't know, and then you get back to them. But don't tell them you don't know too often, because then, why are you in this job, right? So the point is, whether it was a science issue, a science to operations issue, or an operational infrastructure issue, I believed in it. And that came through, I believe, when I was interacting with them. And I didn't say, hey, I can't do this unless you give me 50 new FTE and X amount of dollars. I said, okay, I'll come back and figure out what we can do, in-house first. And then if we're not meeting the mark, then we'll come back to you and say, with more credibility, what are the deltas? Why do we have a delta? The increasing demand structure, whatever, just lay out the facts and why it's important. So that was point number one. The other thing is that the Weather Ready Nation, and going beyond the forecast and warning and connecting with decision makers, connecting with the emergency management community and water resource managers, we changed their jobs by the information we were giving them and the relationships that we established with them, the trusted relationship. They argued for our budgets. They were telling the Hill, this is important to them, being a proactive force, getting a community ready for and responding to so our trusted relationship with them and the critical, I'm telling you that the trusted part. I went to the IAM conference after I announced my retirement, and man, I got to tell you, it was really an emotional experience for all of us. Okay, this is the leadership team of the National Emergency Managers. So that's what we just fed upon it. And if we made a mistake, they were the first people we'd call up. This didn't do well, or hey, we underestimated this, or this thing is going to turn out to be more important than the other thing we've been discussing. We just told them like it was. But we follow through. So it's vision, plan, follow through. Remember the mantra we talked about? Vision. Everybody has a vision, plan, do the plan. Follow through. Part of the follow through is you got to have credibility on the Hill, or you're not going to be able to get the resources you need to follow through. So, just put all that package together. But I say my first learning experience was under Jack Kelly, and him. He did establish credibility with the Hill and with OMB when the three to plus years he had the Weather Service. And Greg Mann and I took note of that was extremely important. And I never forgot that when I went for the building and then the Weather Service position itself.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The trust thing just can't be overstated, the importance of that. And I have a really quick follow-up that kind of built on that, but looks internally at the Weather Service. And you know, they're part of running the Weather Service is that it is just this really interestingly organized organization, that you have the headquarters component and then this extremely massive kind of spatially dispersed field. And a lot of conversation goes on about the relationship between headquarters and field and what that's like, and making that as, you know, as cohesive as it can be. In DC, you face one set of pressures. In the field, you face a very different set of pressures. IDSS is kind of a place where these things come together. Honestly, I'm curious to know, you know, now that you're retiring, maybe you can have, you know, some frank thoughts about your reflections on this relationship. And, you know, have you done anything to try to shift that relationship to be more trusting? And
well, that's the only reason. In fact, that's what's happened. That because we get the operational workforce analysis from McKinsey about every 2 or 3 years, and you can see this incredible growth of trust in not only and acceptance and embrace. And in fact, I believe one of the reasons we're making more advances in Weather Ready Nation than I even imagined would happen in a decade is because the field embraced it and ran with it. I saw this at conference after conference in the last 5 years. So what this restructuring of headquarters and a governance document that basically has that structure addressing the field needs signed by every SESer, or they're not working in the Weather Service. That governance document is saying how we're going to manage this portfolio process to serve the field. And I got asked I call it the Jim Lee question. And if he's listening, I'm probably embarrassing him. But one of the first times I rolled out this restructuring with the portfolio following the forecast process, an STI to improve it, and facilities. We actually have a facilities portfolio because it's important, right? I mean, roofs were leaking. They had tarps inside forecast offices to keep the water off the AWIP's file server in 2013. Okay, Cleveland, right? So the thing is, it has to work for the field, right? So I lay all this out without that last statement, and at an AMS conference in 2014, and Jim Lee walks up to the mic. He goes, "Okay, this is really," because he used to work in headquarters too. Now he's the MIC at Sterling. And he said, "Okay, this is interesting." He said, "I think, you know, this is really interesting that you're doing all this, but how do you know when it works?" And he said, and I actually, I didn't have metrics in my head or anything, and I immediately just looked at him and said, "When it works for you. If this isn't working for you, if it isn't working for the field, then we've wasted time." Okay. But I couldn't make the old structure of 30-something budget. I couldn't make it work. And neither could 3 of the 4 Weather Service directors that I worked for, who, suffered at the altar of those processes wrapped around 34 or 5 PPAs, these budget categories. Nobody knew how they fit together. So we made it work. And I visited over 100 offices. I know Neil was trying to catch up to me there towards the end. John Murphy's going to pass me by as the chief operator. We didn't even have a chief operating officer. I learned that from the UK Met. That was the UK Met when we were restructuring everything. Her said, you have to have a chief operating officer who does the budget stuff for the field and then executes according to that budget. And then, so he's visiting all the offices. So we put all this together. We had another OPPSD, Office of Planning Programs for Service Delivery, had the other 5 portfolios. So one side of the organization chart establishes the requirements. The other one sits on top of 5 portfolios to meet those and priority order. And that's how you stay in budget. We have not blown a budget, and we've executed all of our projects on time, within the schedule and within the budget that was allocated. Every single one of them. So, and a dissemination, which is still condition red, by the way, but we've gotten extra money in 21. We got the plan up on the hill. 22's money hopefully will come in. We got the cloud smart. So Neil, you can relax. We are going to cloud where it makes sense, more than what we started with. We got NOAA weather radio in that being solidified for the 21st century, because there's still 30% of the people who rely on NOAA weather radio. So we're doing all this stuff. It's exciting. I really love it. I still love the job, but it's time.
Hey, Lou, I just want to follow up on Kim's question about the interaction or the relationship between the field and the headquarters. And of all the Weather Service directors I've worked under, I think you did more to enhance that connection and to really tighten up that relationship between headquarters. And one vivid example of this is, I mean, we've had every Weather Service director visit the Weather Center in Norman. We've been fortunate to have Neil come to our office. We've had lots of visitors. But the visit I'll always remember, and I'm sure you remember this, November of 2013, you and I and Dave Andra and Charlie Woodrum standing out in the rubble of one of the schools or the hospital on a cold November afternoon. I mean, you came to town in the aftermath of that. You had other things to do, but I never had a visit from a Weather Service director like that. I mean, that was pretty special, and I mean, that kind of formed a connection, I think, right there to show, you know, you're not just a bureaucrat in Washington. I mean, you're on the ground looking at things, and that made an impression on me.
Yeah, we went to the school where they did everything right. Right? They got the kids out of the classrooms. They got them in the hallways. They did the duck and cover. Storm just obliterated the school, and it collapsed the wall right on them in the hallway. Right? What, 12, 13? They had the names of the kids on the fence that was left, you know, and so you know, and during that visit, I heard your story, you know, where, you know, you went to Joplin after the Joplin disaster in 2011, and I guess it was the hospital coordinator there, whatever, and you learned a lot of what was needed, because the hospital suffered a lot of damage there, and what was needed to prepare for a Cat 5. So there you are, and more, you know, working well before the event, establishing this trusted relationship and plan to what happens before a tornado is about ready to hit a hospital. Well, if you can give them a day's notice and you can actually work that with some level of confidence, they'll actually move people out of the ICU into a more protected. So you worked out the plans with the director of the Moore Hospital, which also took a direct hit from that storm. And yet with 200 people actually showing up at the front door, their plan was to have everybody into these safe rooms. They got everybody into a safe room, and there was 0 lives lost in the hospital, if I remember correctly. So there were 2 aspects to that. That's why, you know, I say he is my favorite WCM, because he was proactive. He was doing this practice stuff before we articulated it as a fundamental part of IDSS. And by the way, you know, these office visits, I learned collaborative forecast process from the Romeoville forecast office, right? The whole office concept was from Peachtree and Slidell, and the Slidell visit. People met together. I mean, I was getting these ideas from my office visits, going to a big city emergency operations center and see how they deal with decision making versus going to rural areas. So, you know, when I took over the Weather Service, I was told, well, you know, you can just map the number of forecasters you need by population density. Well, I went up to Aberdeen, and I met on the way up there, I stopped and met the emergency manager for that area. And I asked her where her office was, because she was talking about all the difficulty needing iPods and all this. She points to a car. She goes, "Come here, I'll show you my office." And she operates out of a car. That's why iPods thing was sitting right in the passenger seat. She had some maps, and I mean, it was amazing. And the complexity of her job was amazing. So I was just picking up these things. But that visit to Norman and being at that school district where people were doing the right thing, and then still have this happen, you know, that was a sobering experience, to say the least. You know.
Well, we do appreciate it, and a couple of other quick things. I know a lot of people have some other questions, but I just want to say thank you for your support of the WCM program. I mean, we had one national WCM conference there in Silver Spring, and maybe you can be a guest visitor or something if we pull this one off in June
we
of
were
next year
trying
in
the last
Madison.
2 years to have that second conference in Madison. It was going to be in Madison too. So,
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, so we appreciate that. And then finally, I just want to say you've been so supportive of us in the field getting to AMS and NWA. I think that's so important. And you talked about the R to O and O to R and all the different combinations of that. I think it's so critical, and you've been super supportive of getting us to those conferences. So I appreciate that too.
Yeah, we need that social fabric back too. There's a social fabric of partnerships, decision making, education, and this is good, but you got to have that. When Jim Spine was looking right through me in up there in Huntsville, it's different than having him looking right through me off of this screen, right? So he was, he's the trust but verify kind of guy, right? So you gotta have that social interact. Let me just mention one thing about the WCM program. It's in the Weather Act, Title IV. That's where we are now authorized to work with the federal, state, and local government is in that Weather Act, and it authorizes the WCM to be that key factor. So I start going to the forecast office. So I have some good news and bad news for you. You're the only position in every forecast office that's now specifically authorized in law. I said, that's the good news. The bad news is if you read everything underneath that, you're doing it all. You're doing it all by yourself. So buckle up, guys and gals, because it's going to be rough. So the IDSS too is, the big news in the last month or so is that we've actually included IDSS in our mission statement, right? So we provide observations or data, forecast and warnings, and IDSS for the protection of life and property. We've come to the conclusion that you can't get to the last half, the mission statement, without IDSS. That's the WCM having to organize that in every office and deal with the the underserved communities, et cetera. All of that's going to wrap around the WCM.
Louis, Troy here. I'm going to pop in because I think it's a good tie-in with what Rick has just brought up. First of all, I so much, more than you'll ever know, appreciate your friendship over the years. We've had lunch before and we've talked about things, but let me talk about what Louis has done with the partners and customers. Rick talked about the WCMs in the field, and I'm going to tell you that Louis has truly reached out to the partners and to the customers out there, the people that, Louis is not, he's not tied directly to, even though he is tied to them in a way. And I've always appreciated that. I don't know sometimes why Louis didn't take that cell phone he has and erase my phone number out of it. But at the same time,
you mean
time,
when you yell at me on the phone?
No,
what the hell, we're going to do something?
But it was always out of love. It was always out of love. No, but I want to tell you that there was never a time that that if I ever sent an email or anything else, that Louis didn't respond, and I mean quickly. And I always appreciate that. And I think, and I'm not the only one. I know that he's done the same thing with other customers and partners. And I'll tell you, from outside the service, the National Weather Service, we appreciate what you've done, and we're going to miss you.
Well, thank you. And I could tell the story about Troy, that when I became AMS president, and then, I had to get the conference theme approved by the council and everything. They said, you need people to help you. You got, and they were offering, some people. I said, the two people I'm contacting, Ken Carey and Troy, and I'm telling them they're on the team.
Yeah, and that was a year, folks.
The conference was in Austin.
Yeah.
So
that was the year. That's a year that I'll never forget, and it was so rewarding to work alongside you, sir.
Well, thank you. And the thing is, and Neil knows this, on our work together at the WMO, and Courtney and that team, being a permanent rep is just another layer on the layer cake here. But I really believed in the enterprise because I believe in what we do is important to all decisions. And we can't connect with all, okay? It's just, we can't serve all the way they need it. So the pie, once this recognition, I mean, business people have to work to direct, to direct customers because that's their bottom line. How do you do that in public safety? It's a little bit different, okay? It's measured differently, you approach it differently. But even there, public safety in a factory, an individual factory making a decision, we can't focus on that. We got, it's on the bigger picture with the emergency manager and water resource managers as examples. And then you got hospitals and you got other aspects that play in. But I believed in that right from the beginning. And I don't know why. I grew up in a family that, my brothers were in the private sector and all that. I was the nerd, off in the corner somewhere, right? But I understood what they did was different than what I did, right from the beginning. I didn't have to make payroll. They did. Right? That's a big difference right there. So the point is, I came to appreciate the private sector and what they brought to this, and that if we work together, that Fair Weather Act was brilliant, by the way. If we work together, the pie gets bigger. So you're not fighting over the same pie, the same size. So if I grow, you lose, or if you grow, I lose. We're going to grow together. And I think that's the reason why it's taken off in this country. And again, Neil came over to the WMO on several occasions. We're viewed as the gold standard in this whole relationship between the public and private sector. People ask us how the hell we do it. Okay. So, I just remember you, in terms of some of the conferences and the fact that you were in Austin, and that we worked a little bit together before that, but I said, this guy knows Austin. I got to get to know Austin because, there were a lot of things go on down there. But I didn't think you were I don't think you were prepared for that phone call.
Well, I had a lot of fun with that, and it was a great year and a great conference.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun doing it. And that's where, by the way, it was the first conference where we started talking about forecasting. This was bringing NOS in and forecasting the harmful algae bloom. So we were taking prediction to the next level. Yep. And it wasn't just, greater accuracy with longer lead time. It was like predicting harmful algae bloom, right? And how NOS was doing that. And it even starting that it was shortly thereafter, discussion started on health vectors, from the harmful algae bloom to health vectors. And that's some of the stuff you're hearing today from the medical community about forecast centers started from that conversation that we initiated in OSTP in the 2014 timeframe. So all of these things are connected.
So I wanted to jump in here real quick, and for a lot of people who understand that running the weather service is obviously an incredibly hard job. I don't know if you know that Louis was also the permanent rep to the WMO for the United States, which is a huge deal in itself. And I have to say, my experience in interacting with other countries over in Geneva with Louis, his relationship with the directors of the Met services in other countries is just unbelievable. Everywhere I would go in whatever country I was, everyone knows Louis. And it was such an amazing experience to really work with the international community. What's next? Who's going to fill your shoes in that role? And where does the private sector, in your view, sort of fit in? Because I don't think a lot of people realize how advanced the public-private relationship in the weather enterprise is in the U.S. compared to other countries that have international Met services, which, for a lack of a better way to describe it, in my opinion, have run private industry out of business in some places.
Yeah. So the thing is, it was in 2019, we, in that Congress, restructured the entire WMO. into 2 commissions, which saves a ton of money, by the way. You got every commission meeting needs translation into 5 different languages and all that. They had 8. So if you wanted to set up a meeting around anywhere on the globe, you had to bring around a whole, pay for a lot of infrastructure to have these meetings work. But more importantly, we brought weather, water, and climate linkage to the infrastructure. That's Commission 1, and to services, Commission 2. In the middle of all of that is a research board and now a platform for the discussion, a welcoming discussion for the public-private enterprise, which was the first time. And the United States, and Neil played a role in this, I played a role in it, Courtney and her team in international affairs played a huge role. That was transformative because there was this straight arm to the private sector in a lot of places beforehand. And now there's this welcoming, this recognition of the role of the private sector across the entire value chain. The real threat, there are countries who do find a threat to private sector in their delivery of services because their weather service in a number of countries are really on shaky grounds versus where we have here, where we have all this extreme weather, all year round. So it's really important that we got that through. We got that through the last Congress, and we doubled down on it this year with the new, I don't know if you saw that new resolution. It really went the way that we wanted it to in terms of the data sharing and the forecast sharing. And the point is that there's, I think that there's going to be more recognition of, they're also developing a fund, an international fund, so that these underdeveloped or developing countries, I should say, have access to a fund to pay for observations in their countries, so that, and then agreements to get forecasts back to them. Okay. So that's one aspect of it. And our training desk are just, are setting a model too. I was there when the training desk started in MOD for the South American and Caribbean, supported that. Joe Friday was very instrumental in that, telling me that'll be the last person you fire as the head of those training desks. You got that? And so I understood that right from the get-go. So we built those up, the African desk, the Southeast Asian desk. There are permanent representatives now that have their certificates hanging on the walls from those desks. And there's updates every month with this kind of setup. They get like 200 people on these updates. It's just tremendous way of building the capacity. So that's how we got to be known. And I'll say we, because I think Courtney is probably better known than I am. And then you got Mike Davidson, the head of these desks, and Priscilla Tao, who's been running the African desk for 25 years. Everybody knows these folks.
Yep.
And they know that we're paying for them at a base. Yeah.
We're talking about Courtney Dragon, who was doing international affairs at the Weather Service. And boy, she kept me out of a lot of trouble overseas as well.
There were times when I just let her intervene because, you think the U.S. government working through that is nonlinear. I mean, when you're in the WMO, you've got to have your finger on the pulse of heartbeats of about 30 different people at the same time. And she's amazing in being able to do that.
Yep. And I think a lot of people just take for granted when we initialize these global models that these observations are just there. We rely on all these other countries for the sharing and contribution of the observations. And now I'm excited to see that the WMO is bringing the private sector into the fold, because they're going to be an integral part of the entire value chain as well.
Yep. And the fact is, I think there's more of a, not only realization of that amongst a number of the permanent reps and their governments in the private sector, but an appreciation for it. So a more trusted relationship for it. So I think you'll see this opening up, and the U.S. will be in a good position to serve those needs. In fact, it's already happening. So.
Dr. Uccellini, I just wanted to step in here. Now, we were both keynotes at the Mississippi State 2019 conference. And I don't know if you realize this, but these students were so over the moon that you accepted their invitation to come and speak. Talking with some of them, they were just super thrilled that you actually made the time to come and talk to the students. And I remember your talk, and one of the things, you're talking about the Weather Ready Nation, and one of your comparisons was the number of deaths between the 1974 outbreak and the 2011 outbreak, and
Right.
how we can really do better. That really hit home when you compare the better forecast, but yet we still had about the same number of deaths. And I just want to thank you for the student inspiration right there. I mean, of course, anytime any one of us hears you speak, it's inspiring, but the student inspiration. And then we've talked about your work on jet streaks. You and I talked a little bit about Hurricane Camille and how in Virginia the jet streak was so important. And I was wondering if you can describe maybe exactly how jet streak forecasting kind of started with your research after that, or maybe something we don't realize about your work with jet streaks, maybe a fun fact about your work with jet streaks.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. I don't know. I was just going to look over there. I got that cowbell, from Mississippi.
Yes,
That was one
I
of the
do
few
too.
things I was able to keep when I cleaned out my office. I still got that. It must be downstairs. So with the jet streaks and forecasting, of course, back in the day when you're looking at 711 models and 150 column, you gotta in the dynamics, part of the first step in dynamics is scaling. Okay, so you can make the proper simplification to the equations to try to address those. How the hell do you do that with a jet streak, right? I mean, it could be 1,000 kilometers long, but the entrance and exit regions are only hundreds of kilometers, okay? And that's where all the action is. And then the width is hundreds of kilometers. So from a scaling point of view, and whether it's trying to get the dynamics out of that or trying to model it and what kind of resolution do you use, you got yourself a problem, right? So the early models really had trouble even representing the jet streak. And so I did gravity waves first, and everybody was saying, well, that's great, but it will never be able to model the gravity waves. Well, guess what the models are doing today, right? The gravity wave underground gets all spun up, when they see these high resolution models pump out some gravity wave stuff, and we all get ready for it, right? So the thing is, it wasn't until the late it was with the NGM, when the NGM came out, I started noticing, the jets are better defined here. Maybe we can do something with this. So Greg Hakam, who we started, I was talking about all the great folks we hired in. Well, students started coming in and spending their summers with us. And Greg Hakam, who's now a professor out at Washington, and I think he was the chair of the department. I don't know if he still is or not, but a really sharp guy and really interested in synoptics. So he comes in, he spends a summer with me as part of the summer program. And part of the program was you get to give a 10-minute talk on your, like a summer camp, give a 10-minute talk at the end. So I convinced him two things. One, let's work on something off the operational models instead of the research model. We had to see if we can identify the same. And when you give your 10-minute talk, you're going to give it like you're at a conference and you're at a job interview. You're not giving one of these, here's how I spent my summer with Louis Uccellini. So that's what we did. And guess what? The NGM on some of these snow events in the northern part of the US, the snow is developing in either in the entrance region of a jet or the exit region of a jet. And sometimes there was some lateral coupling going on like we had on the East Coast. So then I said to him, you're going to write it up. That's what we always said at Goddard Space Flight Center. You got to write it up. You got to publish. And he looked at me. He was still an undergraduate. I says, well, you want the chance? Do you want to be lead author, or do you want me to write it and I'll make you second author? And he said, I'll be lead author. I said, okay, you're going to write it then. I mean, I'll help you and all that, but when, you're not going to put this away for 2 years and come back, so we got it done and we got that published. I believe it was in Weather and Forecast. But that was his first formal publication. And that's what convinced me, that paper, is what convinced me that the operational models were capable of simulating these circulations, and they had a chance now of getting the mesoscale details that we were seeing. I always said snowstorms were mesoscale phenomena wrapped up in synoptic scale lore. Okay, you wait for them for 5 days, and then they form in a band that's this narrow, and they cream one area and completely miss the other around a low that's, you know, a third of the size of the country. But it's mesoscale. It's inherently mesoscale. And that paper with Greg convinced me that the operational models in the late 80s going into the 90s, we're starting to get the right forecast for the right answer. And we could, and then Dan Kaiser and I wrote a paper. Dan was the lead author on this one, about the use of models to resurrect synoptic meteorology, because everybody was saying synoptics is dead. Because what are you going to do with just 12-hour data? He says, well, you know, you got 15-minute data if you want it. You got 10-minute data if you want it. And that's what we did on two of those papers for the President's Day Storm. We used 15-minute data to resolve the creation of the low-level jet, not 12-hour radiosondes or 6-hour, 3 hours. It was 15-minute data was needed to resolve the processes for that low-level jet. Then I knew models could do this. And so when I went over at NCEP, it was, let's go, you know, let's get the higher resolution and let's move it. But that was, it was Greg Hickam's paper that finally, you know, really convinced me that the operational models could get this.
Well, speaking of NCEP, let me, and I'll kick it over to James here in a second so we can have some more humor and lighten it up, but I do want to dig into a depressing topic here. I think one of the most traumatic things I had to deal with when I was at NOAA was losing Bill Lapenta. He was someone that I had worked with my entire career, looked up to. Do you remember calling me that night?
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that, because that was one of the hardest phone calls I've ever, and believe me, I normally screen my calls. And I knew when I saw your number, and it was really late. It was like 11:30 or midnight or something. And I just knew it was bad. But I didn't realize what you were about to tell me. What was that like? And what would you consider one of his top legacies?
Well, one of his top legacies was, you know, was the setting up the summer student program in within the Weather Service. I've been trying my whole career to have an interaction with NSF on the R2O process, and that's been tough. The U.S. Weather Research Program was the closest we came to it, and then when Mike Morgan did his 4 years at NSF, we made some progress there. But we could never get this summer student thing. I wanted to try to replicate something like is done out at NCAR, you know, with the advanced study program, because I did that in 1974 and it changed my life. You know, that's when I knew I got the confidence I could work with these rising stars, and I was there with them. And of course, I got to meet Mel Shapiro. I mean, that was worth every second of it. So Bill came in my office, and as he did with the modeling world, and he said, we were both licking our wounds when it was clear that we thought we were going to get support from NSF, and Kathy Sullivan was looking for us to do something. And then it didn't happen. And then he just said, let's just do it. And I says, okay, what are you gonna do first? He says, I'm going to go see Ming G. I'm going to go to STI. I said, we're doing this. And I said, you want to use my name? Use my name. And if you want me to write something out for you, I will. He never came back. He just got it done. All right. And that program now, of course, it's named after him. And I announced that at his at the funeral, that this was his main legacy. As far as I was interacted with him coming from NASA, like I said, mentored him for a half a year, and of course EMC, and then he was the NCEP director after me. But it was this program. He put every ounce of who he was into this program. And so today, even, we carry this through. I think last year we had 35 people. We got OAR. I announced it as the NWS. By the time I got out of that building, Craig McLean says, "I want in," and then Steve Holtz is in, right? So it's the NOAA, it's the Number Summer Pro, and the undergraduate students are just phenomenal, and they cover the whole range, social science, Kim, to physical science, to modeling, to model diagnostic, ocean cyclogenesis. I mean, it's just amazing listening to him by the end of that 8-week period. That's his main legacy. The day he died, I was up in Boston at the satellite conference, and I think I got back in a hotel room about 8 or 9 o'clock, and my phone rang, and it was Bill's phone. So when I answered, it was Kathy. And she just went on about, Bill is gone. And Bill went out and they had to pull him in. And I go, who? And I didn't recognize the voice. I said, who is this? And she went through the whole story again, but almost word for word. And finally, I got it was, so I'm looking at Bill Lapenta's phone. I said, "You're talking about Bill Lapenta?" And that he was, I guess he was still there. I guess they hadn't removed him yet. So she was calling me right from me. She looked in his backpack that he left by the towel, found the phone. She didn't know what to do, who to call, so she called me. I think I sat down in the room for about a half an hour, just digesting everything, trying to figure out what to do. And I said, "I got to call you." And I remember when you answered the phone, you remember the first thing I said to you? I said, "Are you sitting down?"
Yeah.
Yep. So, it was pretty bad. And then I couldn't sleep that night. I kept on thinking that this was just a bad dream. In fact, I wasn't, I had to go to this satellite conference thing, and it was the international session on what everybody's doing, and then there's this, China, Japan, Korea, and all that. And then I talked to Keith Sider. I said, "Look, at the end of this, I want to make the announcement." So I got up there, and people didn't know what I was going to say, and I announced it at the conference. And what really, there was a lot of things that struck me, but there was a break, and then a poster session right after it, and I was down by the coffee afterwards. The number of students who came up to me and said how Bill influenced them in one program or the EPIC conference out in Boulder the summer before. They're all students. There's just one after another, but like lined up. I couldn't believe it. I knew he counseled and mentored students, but it was just unbelievable. And after that, I went back to my room. I mean, I couldn't even go up to after talking to all those students and listening to their stories and trying to console them. I just went back to my room that following day. It was the last part of the conference I attended. It was a tragic, really tragic, and but he left his mark, and we're honoring him every year with this. He used to make pancakes. He had this breakfast thing he would make for the students. Say, "Okay, this morning you come here hungry because I'm making the pancakes for you." And I think when he set this thing up in the first place, he violated every fire code in that new building. I don't know what he was thinking, but then he went out onto the patio with some. But he had his hot plate thing without the overhead, whatever. But the students that have contacted us from this program talked about it. And of course, when we introduced the program, we introduced him with his chef thing on, at the grill, what he meant to the originals who went through that program. He'd make breakfast for them. So, he's quite an individual.
He certainly had a huge impact on my career, and I hope Kathy and his daughters realize how much he's influenced our field, because I didn't realize. I had heard stories about his mentorship ability, but I had never seen it in action until he jumped up on stage at the Epic conference and took the mic and was congratulating Danae on all the hard work he had done. And that was when I realized that if he's like this with all of these other people, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. It was tragic. And then Fujing right after that. I know he was big with you in the plans for Epic. And certainly he invited me to do this review paper for the Gravity Wave conference that he helped organize every year. And I think he single-handedly resurrected back when, the whole gravity wave thing. And, I'm talking to these theoreticians from all over the world and showing them what I did with that gravity wave paper, my very first publication. And how, Franco Einaudi actually said that changed the whole discussion on gravity waves.
Well,
Fujing was a force of nature too.
Fuching and I were in the same, we went to grad school together, and we both realized.
How'd you keep up with him? How'd you keep up with him?
He was studying gravity waves under Steve Koch when that January 2000 storm dumped 2 feet of snow in Raleigh when the models were calling for 4 inches.
Yeah.
And that was my PhD thesis. I mean, that was a huge model bust.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a rough year.
By the way, guys, I got a fever, and the only prescription is more cowbell. All right.
I got to go find mine before this thing ends.
Those are the best
I got this one in 2016, and I will say I will be a keynote in 2022. So 6 years later, I will be back and get another one.
So what's interesting? How did you get invited to that? Just by your presence?
I think what they're doing, they're bringing back people this year or in 2022 that went through the program that were at Mississippi State. Some folks like me that have been there for a long time. So I think that's the deal. But let me ask you this. You have had such an amazing career and you have lived the dream. What is let's say that we know right now who your replacement's going to be, if anybody could replace you, the next director of the National Weather Service. What advice would you give them to be successful?
Well, let's put it this way. I would honor what previous directors have meant to me in that they don't give me advice unless I ask. Okay. So let's say they're asking. Let's say they're asking for advice.
So
what I would tell them going in is that you've got the most dedicated, committed workforce in the federal government who believes in a mission, and that'll take you 80% there or more. Okay, that you're there to serve them because that's how amazing the workforce in the Weather Service is. Sure, we got warts and we got this and we got that, but that's the main message. That now, if the person is from the Weather Service, they already know that. I think they're, what I was talking about in terms of not losing the confidence from the Hill is an extremely important part of the job. You've got to have that. So there's your partners out there, who love the Weather Service. I think I've seen examples where the emergency management, when they had their budgets cut in 2017, when they go to the Hill, the first thing they'd argue for was money for the National Weather Service. Okay, so that's a partnership, or you don't want to lose. Okay, so but exactly how they go about doing their business, I could just lay out that there's a foundation there, really. But the dynamics of the job and how things work on a director will change. They were changing even during the last 2 years here. So it's really hard. It really is hard to give advice, because I can only tell them the opportunity I had, and I think my success, in large part, is that I gained the trust of the workforce, and they took us. They took us down this pathway that was mapped out. I had instincts and the like, but we're in a different period now. We got the budget structure, we got the process, we got this, we got that. There's a whole bunch of changes coming. Prediction is not, you think about this, folks. We were the only part of science that did prediction and talked about it and said it was our future all the way into the 50s and 60s. And now everybody wants to do it. Okay. So how do I give advice to that?
Yeah, right. I totally understand. So when I'm in Starkville, I'm going to see a lot of college students, and a lot of college students listen to this program that would like a career in the National Weather Service. Let's say they're 19, 20, 21, 22. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're in grad school. What advice can you give them, and what will the National Weather Service look like in 10, 20 years from now?
So the advice I would give them is, live your dream. All career paths are different, but live your dream. You don't use somebody else's career path to define your own, because it's too much capriciousness in the whole thing. Ask Neil where he thought he'd be a year before he was the acting director of NOAA, right? So the point is, right, fishing. So the point is live your dream. Point number one. Point number two is it's a very competitive environment getting a job in the Weather Service. So get FaceTime. There are students as part of their courses volunteer. They get into programs. They apply for programs early. They get experience, but get the FaceTime. This is what I don't like about this notion that this is the new normal for businesses or service delivery being the new normal. I don't believe it, because you need the social fabric. You need to have that experience. You need to be there, for somebody to tap you on the shoulder, because a lot of my career changes have started with Charlie Anderson tapping me on the shoulder, asking me what I was going to do after I was an undergraduate, or Joanne Simpson getting me involved in something which led me down a pathway which would prove to be incredibly helpful. So you got to have that. So that's the advice I would give them. And it might be that the career path is you do go to the private sector first and come in. Maybe you go to the private sector and you don't want to go into the Weather Service, right? But don't just say, hey, it's got to be the Weather Service from day one. You can try for it, but if it doesn't happen, don't give up on your dream. But FaceTime is incredibly important. Getting that experience on the floor is incredibly important, and continue asking questions, to help you figure it out.
So I've got one last question, and then I think the committee will give you a pass on your exit interview here. So what's next? Birding, gardening, or both?
Oh, I've already been out in the garden, and birding is out there every time. I don't know. I still want to write. I got Paul Cosin and I have been talking about doing volume 3 in the Snowstorm book. I'd like, they've got the epic paper done. We've got the history paper hopefully done. I don't know what the status of that is, but I've got some ideas on some papers already. There's some kind of landing pad for that might be helpful. But the point is, I think I'll take about a month off after 50 years and then jump back in somehow. Like I said, the family support has been absolutely fabulous. The 50 years in the weather, this thing maps almost directly with the 50 years I've been married to Susie. So, I think after all this time in the house and not getting out, she wants me to get back out, right? So anyway, but there's still things to do, and I can still write and still think and still get people together. Got the space weather thing done. which I'm really proud of. It's like 30-something agencies working all on the same goal now towards the space weather as mapped by the Pro-Swift law. Things like that still interest me, and we'll see what happens.
Well, Louis,
but if it's just writing
go ahead.
papers, not be happy. That's the main thing. That's my main goal. Right.
Yeah. So we want you to come back in about a year and tell us what it's like on the other side. Okay.
Probably a little bit more restful.
Yeah. Hey, Tim, are you still awake? Tim, how'd we do? Did we do okay? Did you get any flags here? I'm waiting for Tim to see if we have any flags thrown here. I think we're okay. We're getting a thumbs up from Tim. So, Louis, thank you so much. I think I can speak for all of us in that we are so thankful for what you've done for the weather enterprise. Thank you for your long career. Thank you for your public service. Thank you for your servant's heart. You're a great example of servant leadership, and understand that you're well respected and well loved across the entire enterprise, not only within the National Weather Service, but in the private sector as well. So on behalf of everybody, just thank you so much.
Thank you for having me here. I've really enjoyed it, as usual.
Okay. Well, Louis, thank you so much. And we appreciate it. And we'll get you back in about a year for an update on what it's like on the other side. And Louis and Tim, thank you both. And we're going to take a very quick break here. We're going to have Tony Rice. We're going to have Jens This Week in Tornado History. We're going to come back with the email segment, picks of the week, and much more. I mean, much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Back in January, astronomer Greg Leonard discovered a long-period comet from the Mount Lemmon Observatory near Tucson, Arizona. It was hoped that the comet would become visible, maybe even naked-eye visible, later in 2021. Well, that week has come. Comet C21A1 Leonard is visible in the hours before sunrise, low on the eastern horizon. Now, don't expect to go out in your suburban neighborhood and immediately spot this icy visitor. You're going to need dark skies and probably at least a pair of good binoculars to gather enough light to make it out. Identifying the best time to look is an interesting balance of how comets react as they draw closer to the sun and what happens to light as it passes through our atmosphere. The later in the week you look, the closer the comet is to the sun and the brighter it'll probably be. However, it's also going to be closer to the horizon, and by the weekend, is going to get lost in the sun's glare. Closer to the horizon is bad on two fronts, actually. One is the visual clutter, trees and houses and such blocking the view. The bigger problem in trying to see dim objects at the horizon is all of that atmosphere. You see, you're looking through 40 times more atmosphere at the horizon than compared to directly overhead. If you put just 10 degrees under that object, that reduces this to 6 times more, another 10 degrees, and that's 3 times more atmosphere, in large part because the thickest parts of the atmosphere are near the ground. With all of this in mind, I'm thinking Wednesday or Thursday, beginning about 2 hours before sunrise, for the next 60 to 90 minutes will be the best time to see the comet. By next weekend, the comet will be visible after sunset. Then it's a matter of waiting each evening until the sun is sufficiently below the horizon. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history. During the early morning of December 6th, 1983, an F3 tornado crossed through parts of Dallas County, Alabama, in the Selma area. It developed near Alabama Highway 22 west of Selma, moved to the northeast for about 13 miles. At least 103 structures were damaged or destroyed along the path. 30 to 40 vehicles at a new car dealership were destroyed. Numerous units at the Rangedale housing project in Selma were demolished, and there was one fatality here. Clarence Chappell was asleep when the tornado hit. Here is the report from the Alabama Journal on December 7th, 1983. The tornado awakened many residents in Selma, but Clarence Chappell apparently never woke up before hundreds of pounds of brick and mortar fell on him. Chappell, believed in his late 60s, was found dead in his bed, crushed by the weight of the debris after the twister smashed his housing project apartment. A dorm at Selma University was struck by the twister. 50 students were occupying the dorm at the time. 7 students received minor injuries when the roof and parts of the second floor of their dorm was destroyed. Near the university, Westside Junior High School sustained damage, as well as several homes and a convenience store. Read about this event and hundreds more at tornadotalk.com.
All right, time now to dive into the email inbox and let's see if we can find anything this week.
We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
All right, so I'm playing a little catch up tonight. So I'm going to do 3 emails. This is from November 29th from our friend Richard Cook in Scotland. He was just giving us a little update on what happened with the storm Arwen that impacted the UK, the first Met Office named storm of the season. And it was unusual for us in the UK as it came down from the north and impacted the east coast of the UK. The wind gusts were 98 miles per hour. Rare red warning was issued by the UK Met Office, and the storm was well forecast. The area that was hit was fairly densely populated, Scotland area, Eastern England. There were 3 fatalities, sadly, but he felt that more would have happened without the red warning. Over 100,000 people lost power, and more than 10,000 are still without power when he wrote this email to us. So I love learning about storms like this, you know, across the pond, and how they handle their forecasts and such. So we appreciate that email. And then we have Nate Larson, who wrote to us just about 12 hours ago and talked about the first blizzard in Fargo, North Dakota this year. Could definitely hear the winds. The school over in the Moorhead area had a 2-hour delay. And just a normal Monday as usual, have to bundle up. Send us a little photo here. The temperature was 4 below and it felt like 24 below. So that makes my 18 degrees tonight not feel that cold, actually. And then I thought this might be interesting for Morgan. We actually had Devin Greeny, who wrote about the December 14th will be 15 years since the Hanukkah Eve windstorm and flash flooding that hit the Pacific Northwest. And aside from the damage and the 13 fatalities, the Seattle Post-Intelligencer did not publish a December 15th edition, and the Times published December 20th front page warnings in 6 languages not to burn charcoal indoors, a contributor to some of the deaths. Yeah. So just kind of brought this up, and then do you remember that? Do you remember what happened?
I wasn't here for that, but the Hanukkah Eve storm is one of the top wind storms ever here in the Pacific Northwest, here in Western Washington. And it just came up just right along that path from southwest to northeast across the northwestern part of the Olympic Peninsula of Washington State. And that's where we get our biggest windstorms. But that, I think that is the strongest one since. We had one Inauguration Day storm back in, actually Hanukkah Eve would have been after the Inauguration Day storm of 93. But yeah, that's definitely one that sticks in the minds of a lot of locals here. I wasn't here up here in the Northwest at the time, though.
Yeah. So thanks everybody for the emails. Shoot us an email at weatherbrains.com. If you have questions, stories, riddles, or jokes that you would like us to share, all clean jokes, please. And then please get on our website and sign up for our newsletter if you haven't done so. It's really been fun to put that together. And we have got some amazing articles that are coming from our brainy folks here. Mr. Rick Smith is putting the article out this week. And just some great tidbits, history, and all kinds of fun stuff. So please sign up for that. You'll get it in your email every Thursday morning. Back to you, James.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen. So Morgan, real quick, what's going on with you? Been a while since you've been on the show. The best pipes in the business. I mean, you make this all sound bad. I mean, what's happening in Seattle?
You know what? We had our wettest fall on record, a little more than 19 inches of rain in the 3 months, September, October, and November at Seattle Tacoma International Airport. And on the coast at Forks, they had more than 2 feet of rain in the month of November alone. So after a very, very dry summer, thankfully, we didn't have too much wildfire smoke as we have had in previous years here in the Northwest. It was a beautiful summer, although it was extremely dry. And then we had that record heat, 108 degrees, 111 degrees where I am here on the east side back in the month of June, just shattered all the records on that day. And it was amazing going out and looking at some of the Christmas tree farms, especially those out toward the Cascades. About every 4th tree was this rust-colored brown. It just didn't make it through that several days where we had the extreme triple-digit heat. Not just one day, but 3 days of triple-digit heat. And then we followed it up with a record wet start to fall. And who knows what this La Nina winter has in store, but I think we're going to be pretty busy up here.
Never a dull moment for you.
No.
And we have it on from a reliable source that you actually came into work one day with a tank top and flip flops back in the summer. Is that true?
I think security would have escorted me from the building pretty fast had I done that. So I'll blame that on my morning guy.
All right. So we've got to do picks of the week here, Morgan. So be ready for a pick here. We'll come back around the horn here in just a second, but we're going to go around here and everybody's going to share something that is weather related. And my pick of the week is a little essay that I wrote about the Hawaiian blizzard debacle and how somehow that just got out of hand. I mean, if you go down to the local Target or Walmart or Dollar General, they heard on the news that it's snowing on the beaches in Hawaii and they got 100-mile-per-hour winds. And it's just all of these clickbait headlines just got out of hand. Anyway, just some thoughts and observations on that. And some people challenge me on it, which is fine. I love being challenged. So anyway, we'll put the link up on weatherbrains.com. So Troy, do you have a pick of the week for us, sir?
I'm going to go your way for a second. When you watch and you see these headlines that say Hawaii under a blizzard warning, that's just not right. I mean, come on, folks. Let's see if we can try to be journalists a little bit when you write these headlines. And I'll go past that. One thing that I think Louis has done so well is, especially with the anniversary of the Weather Service and everything, is so much of the history is now under his leadership was a lot of it's being documented now. And one of my favorite sites is one that's been around for a while, but I want to give a shout out to Chris Gielhart, who is at the Central Illinois office of the National Weather Service in Lincoln. And that's my pick of the week. If you've never been to this page, what Chris has done for older folks, old farts occasionally is what I like to call it. James, we remember the old days of the WSOs and the WSMOs where the radars were, the agricultural weather service centers. He has gone through and you can go through state by state and look at these offices that are now closed. To me, it's fascinating. And I love this, what he calls the brief history of the National Weather Service offices, past and present. And that's my pick of the week.
That's a great pick. That's a time suck for me. Aubrey, you got to go on TV in a second. Let's go to you real quick.
Yeah, so I went ahead and plugged myself. I broke out into my own Etsy shop this year. So I've been plugging away at those signs. A lot of people have ordered those over the last couple of years. Yep, Rick's got one right there. So, and I had a couple of new ones that I've come up with, so you can check those out. I can still get Christmas orders in. I can probably get some stuff out by this weekend, and then it's up to the good old USPS. So, but if you want to send those Christmas orders in, I can still get them out, hopefully by the holidays.
Time is of the essence, though.
Yes.
So the sooner, the better.
Sooner, better.
So, right. And we're going to highlight your Etsy shop up on weatherbrains.com. But have a good show, Aubrey, and thanks for being here this week. All right,
Great
Neil,
show,
what's your pick of the week? Go.
My pick of the week, and I've been saving this one, is the Bill Lapenta internship program. It is a fantastic opportunity for students to come in, really explore how the modeling process works, look at the research to operations. And it was courtesy of Louis that it was named after Bill Lapenta. So fantastic internship program. It's open for applications right now. The end of the period is the end of this month. So get your applications in before the end of the year.
Awesome. And I learned some things about Bill I didn't know tonight. I'm sure glad we had a chance to talk about it. And that's a great pick, Neil. Thank you. All right, Kim, what have you got for us this week? What's your pick of the week?
Comes in two parts, but two different articles that kind of talk about a similar thing. The U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, interestingly enough, is investigating a set of disasters for the first time. Civil rights groups don't typically get involved in our space, but they are interested in whether or not there's racial discrimination after disasters occur in the way that federal funds are doled out. So it's not necessarily an explicit kind of race-based discrimination, but more of an implicit kind. And so just some interesting details included in the article. And FEMA, the second article that I posted was FEMA already stepping up to the plate to at least collect different kinds of data that can illuminate whether this is occurring, to what extent, and with which programs. So interesting things to read about if you're interested in social justice and the interface with our field.
All right, Kim, thank you so much. Good stuff. All right, Jen, what's your pick of the week?
All right. So a couple of months ago, I was talking to my neighbor and he was going on and on and on about this tornado that he had helped his neighbor and he was in Florida. And I'm like, well, when was it? He goes, I don't know, 91, 92. I'm like, all right, I'm finding out what it was. And then he showed me all of his photos. I said, I would like those photos. And then I wrote a summary. So we have a brand new free summary. It's the Pinellas Park, Florida F3 that hit October 3rd, 1992. When I started delving into it, I didn't realize that there was absolutely no warning at all on these tornadoes. The Weather Service had in Tampa Bay had not upgraded their radar. The Melbourne radar actually could see the storms, but that forecaster was dealing with everything happening in his area. So there was a natural disaster report about it. So I read through and kind of went a little bit more in depth. There's a lot of stories that I added. There's just so many folks. It's a very, populated area there in Pinellas Park, and there sadly were 3 fatalities. There are a lot of survival stories as well, and just some very interesting things that I was able to dig into. So it's a free summary at tornadotalk.com. You can get the link on our website for the Bike Spot Pick of the Week today.
That's a great pick. And I got to say on your audio segment today, I'll never forget that morning, that Selma tornado in 1983. I talked with Joe Smitherman. Joe was the mayor of Selma for 35 years. And I talked with him at like 5 a.m. and he was not happy. As I recall, that tornado touched down with no warning. And he was just in a state of shock. But that brought back some memories. It was an all-nighter for us in the weather office that night. That was a horrible tornado. But again, that's a great pick, and we'll put that up on the website. And again, Jen, for people who want to support you, describe how people can do that.
So we have a membership if folks want to help support to help kind of offset our costs. You go to tornadotalk.com and there's our membership link. You can do per month, $2.95 or $4.95, or you can pay for the whole year. And it just covers, we have some premium articles. A lot of our super outbreak stuff is behind the paywall. And we have 2 new summaries coming out in December that will be premium summaries that you're going to want to read. I'm just saying. Rick Smith's been involved in one of them. I'll just say that. So it's going to be really,
that's
really great.
That's a good tease.
Yes, exactly. So thanks, James.
All right, Rick. So let's go to you. What's your pick of the week this week?
Well, mine ties in directly with Troy's, and with Louis being on, wanted to kind of look back at the history and heritage of the Weather Service. So last year was 150-year anniversary of the Weather Service, I think. So they set up a whole heritage site. So there's lots and lots of station history on their individual offices, and then lots and lots of stories from people that have worked in the Weather Service, Weather Bureau throughout the year. So mine and Troy's go perfectly together, and we didn't even coordinate that. So,
all right, good deal. So, Morgan, we've stalled as long as we can. We now turn the floor over to the golden pipes of meteorology.
I'm actually going to go along with Troy and Rick, because my pick of the week is something that a lot of us have used. And of course, that's the Iowa State University, Daryl Hertzman's, the Mesonet there. And something that he did last year that I didn't know about until this year is when you go and search for products, National Weather Service text products from a certain weather office, you were able to go back to 2008. Well, he backfilled that to 1983, and I didn't know that. And a few months ago, when I found that was online, I started going back because I was a mere tyke back in 1983. But growing up back in Abilene, Texas, I was terrified of severe storms when I was a kid. And that terror of severe storms turned into fascination when I grew up. And so I've been able to go back and kind of piece together, okay, this tornado or this big event happened, or this huge hailstorm. We had to replace the roof on my home, and to look at the National Weather Service severe weather bulletins. It just, I just went down a rabbit hole of memory lane, and maybe I just am so much of a weather data geek, but also a history buff as well. I like going back and now looking at certain historical events from back in the 80s and 90s, particularly. And even when I was there in Austin going to school, and we have some big flooding events in Central Texas, going back and looking at some of those. So I'll put a link, give a link to Bill for the show notes. That'll take you back to 1983 for the Fort Worth office. And the one key to that, if there was an office that existed like the Abilene office before the late 90s modernization, you search for the successor office like San Angelo instead of Abilene. That's how you go through that.
Well, you actually can see, Morgan, those WSO Abilene statements. You see the text, the stuff the WSO at Abilene did issue at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That'll go back to my days in Dallas in 84, 85, 86. And the old Stephenville radar. I mean, that brings back very fond
The
memories.
hourly
So
radar
that's
summaries, the hourly radar summaries from Stephenville and Hondo, and all of those are on there. Yeah.
Hondo.
RNS. Yep.
Oh man, goodness gracious. That is in Centerville, Alabama, CKL. I mean, this is way before everybody else on the show was born here probably, but that's great stuff. So Morgan, real quick, what do you need to plug here? Plug your social media, plug TV station, whatever you need to plug away, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, the station's good at plugging the rest of us, online and everything like that. But my personal, it's my work email or work Twitter is Morgan Cairo 7, KIRO7. And you can get there or get me on Instagram and Facebook as well. Those are the three I'm primarily on. I have not been forced into a TikTok account yet. I will go kicking and screaming.
So who all on this show is on TikTok? Is anybody on TikTok here? I'm the only guy. Wow. And I'm the world's worst TikToker guy. I'm not funny. I don't dance. But my young demos live there now. So anyway, but listen, thanks to everybody here. We're real late here. This thing has gone long, but I'm glad it did go long. And Neil, thank you for leading the discussion with Louis tonight. Neil. I thought this was a great discussion.
It was.
I do want to. Yeah.
It was an honor and a privilege to have the opportunity to talk with Louis. It was a thrill of my career to be able to serve alongside him at NOAA.
And I do want to get him back in a year. I would love to have him back in about a year just to see what it's like on the other side of life for him. And I know he's probably not going to slow down at all, but we got to go because it is so late. If you want to get in touch with us, the email address here, it's email@weatherbrains.com. And we got Jen back in the saddle. We'll do more email next week. Of course, the show notes, all the websites we've talked about tonight on the website, weatherbrains.com. We're typically here every Monday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. You can watch at live.bigbrainsmedia.com, but most of you listen, and we thank you for that. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and God bless. Hey, Morgan, thanks for the time. It was great having you on tonight. You're the greatest.
Great being here. Thanks.
Hey, Morgan, thanks. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Guys. You'll have a